helping you to succeed, teaching like nobody else. Financial empowerment, giving you strategies for generational wealth, so you can start helping yourself. More money for you to be getting. This the moment for you to be winning and be living financially independent.
Market Hustle community, welcome to episode 37. We are rolling right through these. We kicked off 2025 pretty quickly, and we're already 3 episodes in through the year. So this is awesome. We're making some great progress. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome. It's so great to have you here. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. Thank you for coming to another episode. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Josh. I'm the guy behind the Market Hustle. And we are just ready to keep rolling through these podcasts. We have a lot of great guests lined up for future episodes. And this current episode 37, we're bringing on a certified behavior analyst to come in and talk up a very important subject, which is the topic of relationship/money. So we're going to be diving into the relationship side of the money equation. So I'm really excited for this because we haven't really talked a lot about this on the podcast. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation, and I'm sure many of you lovely listeners will be able to relate to it in one way or another. That being said, I just got back from sunny Arizona a couple of days ago. Washington has actually been somewhat sunny, believe it or not. We haven't had a lot of rain these last few days, but it has been cold. So we're dealing with the cold winds and the cold front in general, as expected in the winter. That being said, let's welcome our co-host back. We got the full gang here today. We got Pierce and Boffy. Let's open it up with Pierce. Pierce wasn't able to make it to the last episode, but how are things going in sunny California, Pierce, since we last talked with you?
Good, man. 7 o'clock at night, 63 degrees, like 72-degree weather today. It was my day off, so I went with a drive with my girlfriend. We had some lunch on the back of my car in the canyons, and then after that, just relaxed, watched some TV, and now I'm here, excited for this podcast.
Great to have you back, man. The last episode was really interesting. We talked with Fernando, and he definitely opened up a new perspective on the trading side of things. And if I'm not mistaken, Pierce, you were able to listen to that, right?
Yes, sir, I was. It was super informative. I learned a lot of stuff that I otherwise didn't know because I don't try to educate myself on the trading side of things. It's not something I'm interested in, but it's definitely a super interesting point of view to hear.
100%. And for those of you who, if this is your first episode, make sure to watch or go listen to episode 36 after this podcast. You can actually watch them now. We're starting to upload them on YouTube. So if you prefer to watch the podcast, look up the Market Hustle on YouTube and you can start watching them there. That being said, Pierce, great to have you back, man. Glad you're able to make it to this episode. Boffy, how about you, my friends? How are things going in New Jersey? I'm sure it's probably cold.
What's going on? It's a packed house in here tonight, man. I'm excited for this episode, but it is definitely cold. I didn't even go in the office the last like 2, 3 days. I said, forget it. I'm just not even going. I mean, they could fire me if they want. I'm not. I'm just not going. But it's been brutal out here. And it's been such a busy month with work, with the new role, getting acclimated to that. And this is like, January and February essentially is like the most busiest time. So I'm like thrown in the mix of the fire, but I'm enjoying the process, having fun, enjoying things, taking care of myself. I'm really excited for this episode because we definitely have a professional here, and I would love to hear his perspective on the topics at hand today. So I'm all ears. I got my notebook and my pen. I'm ready to go.
I love it, man. Me as well. Me as well. Great to have you back, Boffy. That being said, let's waste no more time. Let's welcome back he's actually a return guest. So if you have been listening to the podcast for a while, in episode 13, we brought an awesome guest to talk over collectibles as an investment. And that was Georgiy. Well, Georgiy is returning here at episode 37. And I think, what better guest to have on to talk about this subject than a certified behavior analyst who deals with some of this stuff, not only career-wise, with the behavior side of things, but also, I'm sure he has some experiences and, some raw experiences that we're going to talk over in this podcast alone. So, Georgiy, so great to have you back for another episode. I'm really excited for this topic that we're going to dig into. How are you doing, my friend? How are things going on your ends?
Yo, it is great to be here. Everyone who tuned in 24 episodes ago, episode 13, you could hear my backstory there. Long story short, came from the Soviet Union, figured out that there's this thing called investing, and I was like, why is not everyone doing this? Started doing it, and we're on the road to early retirement or work optional life by around 2029, 2031. And I just want to say it's a great thing, Josh, that you mentioned that this is gonna be like also like live, like you can look at it on YouTube, because I was about to pick my nose and I'm glad that I didn't. So and then Bafi, every time he mentioned like the word fire, like, oh, I'm fired up, I'm ready to go. Me and Pierce were like flinching because we're going through the California fires, and we're like, someone said fire, there's a fire. Oh my gosh. So I am coming in and definitely going to be raw and vulnerable here. I'm a behavior analyst, and even though that's my day job, there's some things like the California fires, right? You can't prepare for it. I mean, you could try your best. There's always going to be a storm coming in life, and you could do everything you can. Some people actually go a little bit too hard preparing for every single situation. They forget to live life. So where I'm coming from, I'm deep in the deep in the trenches. Had to stutter there because of how deep these trenches are. I was in a 6-year relationship, and I love the girl. She's amazing, but it just did not work out, and it took 6 years for both of us to figure it out. And I figured, I love money, not just as a piece of paper that you could buy whatever you want with, but as a lens of your own behavior and the people around you. So I really like in the English language, money has all of these like water like connotations. I'm sure someone brought that up in a podcast episode. They better have. If not, here it is. You're hearing it for the first time. But it's like a currency, right? A current. There's cash flow. You go to the banks. So there's this flow with money, and we all know like the story of narcissist, right? He looked into the water and he fell in love with himself and drowned in it. So I don't want anyone to drown when it comes to money, but there is this flow, and it's touching everything in life. It is a nonverbal behavior. It's how we communicate with the world, how we communicate with each other, and it's no coincidence that we have a culture that kind of lacks a little bit of communication skills, and there's a kind of big red flag when it comes to financial like conversations and relationships, where we have about 30% of relationships or couples breaking up due to an overlying money financial reason. So that's what I'm here to break down in this candid conversation. So be gentle with me, anyone listening in. 6 years raw, but we're here because I was like, we got to bring these feelings to the people, especially its perspective with money and how it changed like the way I view things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And first off, Georgie, I really appreciate you being willing to come on to this podcast and be vulnerable, talking about, your experience, especially a recent experience, because a 6-year relationship, that's nothing light. That's a heavy relationship. And I'm sure it's been difficult to unpack, especially when, when it comes to values being a core part to some of the disagreements or maybe some of the tension that was caused there. So again, I really appreciate you coming on here and being willing to talk it over, because I think not only is it helpful, for all of us, like, the co-host, myself, to learn from, but also just for all the guests who are, listening in, because, inevitably, we all go through, maybe relationship difficulties or problems, or even in the dating scene, that can be, money topics can be a very touchy subject to kind of consider or even talk over. So I think this is a very important episode to dive into, and I'm really looking forward to being able to hopefully help give some insights to your learning experience, especially with the 6-year relationship. I think you'll be able to unpack some valuable insights to help people either communicate better or more openly with money with their partner, or maybe avoid some of the early signals that maybe you could share, with stuff that kind of pops up to where maybe you figure out that maybe you're not as compatible as you might have thought you would have been. So again, I really appreciate that. And I am curious though, Georgie. I mean, you came on. Maybe we can, before we dive into the details of that, you came on almost a year ago. So back in February, looks like February 16th, 2024 is episode 13. So we're almost closing in a year since we last spoke with you on this podcast. So maybe for the people who have listened to that previous episode, maybe give us a little update, maybe on your career, or as well as maybe your investing journey between then and now, because, a lot has changed over the last 12 months in the stock market in general. The S&P 500 is up roughly 25% over the last 12 months alone. So I'd love to kind of hear an update on the investing side of things, as well as maybe career-wise, and then we can dive into the meats of the podcast when it comes to the relationship dynamics.
For sure, for sure. And for anyone who's plant-based like me, it's beyond meat. So I actually been making a lot of moves in my career, and I'm a behavior analyst. I work with kids on the autism spectrum and insurance companies that provide for them. So one thing I've been doing since the breakup is really like honing in on my work. Not that I didn't before, but now I'm honing it in a new way where I'm really thinking a lot more just not just about my own needs, but the whole team, especially with the California fires, and that impacted our clinic where we work with kids directly, where we actually like all collaborated and decided to shut down and stop business for 3 days. And COVID actually taught us a lot about that. And even now, like conditions aren't too safe. So yeah, we're adjusting to that. Another thing I was doing was I learned a lot about negotiations coming from this relationship that it's kind of still a part of me, even though the relationship itself doesn't exist. Um, Unless you're doing what's that show called? Oh, I should know it. It's what's that guy with the crazy white hair? He's a scientist. You guys all watch it. Everyone tuning in. Regular, it's not regular show. He zaps people and travels through dimensions. It's a timeline joke, and I
Rick and
failed.
Morty.
Rick and Morty. Oh my gosh.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pierce.
That's a great show.
There's definitely another dimension where we learned our lesson a lot sooner, and that goes for anyone going through a breakup. But one thing that I realized is sometimes when I'm winning for myself, I could be winning for others as well. So at my work, I actually bypassed people that were just not worth building a deep relationship with. And I realized which targets to freeze to essentially give everyone a very huge raise who's in my position. And this raise is extremely significant. It's something like a 30% raise for every hour worked after your first like 20 hours. But the devil's in the details. But it was just cool to think like, hey, I don't have to waste time investing in certain people, and that's okay. I need to find the people to bond with. And I just went straight to the CFO and the CTO, and I was like, whoa, I can connect with these people. And then I realized it's not all on me. So I went to my coworkers in my position, and I was like, guys, I'm not going to do all the talking, or else, I'm the money guy, and like everyone knows I talk about money. So how about you guys make some of these points? And they did. And it was just a beautiful coming together moment. And we're all getting big, big raises, which is going to help the clinic overall. And I think that's just another way of like, advocating not for just yourself and winning, but for other people and winning as an outcome. When it comes to the stock market, I haven't changed a bit of my strategy. I've been investing the same amount of money since we last spoke, and since the year before that and the year before that. My income doesn't really grow too much, and I'm really, really happy with that. I don't pursue like increasing it. I am perfectly comfortable here with how much I make, and I still find these opportunities, like I just mentioned, to increase it. I've been definitely more interested in crypto recently. It's only 7% of my portfolio, but with the election, with maybe Bitcoin becoming part of our reserve in the future, I think a lot more people think, whoa, this can actually happen. I mean, it sucks now that Bitcoin's at an all-time high, but as Rick from Rick and Morty would tell you, oh, you haven't seen all time. The future is where the all-time high probably is, or if it's not in this dimension, it definitely happens in another dimension. So that's kind of what I've been up to. And Pokemon cards all-time high right now. It's crazy. All sorts of records being broken on pieces of paper with little monsters on it. So that's kind of a little update on me and my adventures.
Man, that's incredible. Yeah, you've clearly been up to quite a bit. And I can imagine your coworkers and the people you work with are pretty happy with how you've been able to help with the negotiation side of things. So that's also incredible. And what I really like about what it kind of highlights is all of these money skills that you've learned over the last 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, like however long you've been on your investing journey. I know it's been a while. Not only is it helping yourself, but it's also helping you empower others around you to also make better money decisions, whether it's helping people negotiate, or even investing in general. Like I know you have your Instagram page, and you help quite a bit of people kind of do exactly what we're doing with the Market Hustle, helping empower people to take advantage of this great thing called the stock market. So shout out to you, Georgiy, for doing all of that. And yeah, the crypto stuff is also interesting, with this new administration, they're clearly a lot more bullish on the crypto side of things. So that's been an interesting thing to kind of watch play out. I'm curious though, when did you start to get into the crypto side of things? I think that'd be some good
Yeah,
context.
everybody got a crazy uncle. Well, my uncle, he came over, and he just was like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and it was 2017, right before one of the biggest crypto winters that we've had. And I ended up being like, hey, I make $3,000 a month, and I have I have more than an emergency fund saved up due to life's privileges. I didn't have to pay rent back then. My mom saw what I was doing with the money, and she was like, yo, just you're so close to 100K. You know what you're doing. You figured the game out. Keep going, and we're gonna use your privilege and milk it, and one day you'll take care of me. And I was like, you don't even have to put that in there. You already know it. So that's just our Soviet values, right? And like that's part of what this future discussion of relationships is gonna be. There are different values. Some people might be like, ew, your mom actually held you back by letting you exploit that privilege, right? And it's like, hey, we have different views of life, and that's okay. Should we keep investing in a certain kind of relationship? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we have to find the type of relationship. Maybe we're better off friends. But with that said, yeah, just have a little brain fart right there and got lost in the sauce. But crypto, that's right. My great uncle, not great uncle, regular uncle. I have a great uncle. He talks about he's actually my crazy uncle. But this uncle, he kind of convinced me that this is going to be part of the future. And I was investing, I put in 6K into it up front, and I watched it all tank 90%. And I wish that I don't want to say wish because, uh, I never want to go backwards and like change my behavior. Otherwise, I wouldn't learn the lesson. But the lesson there was just continue dollar cost averaging into any type of investment vehicle. Don't lump sum unless it's a very, very specific type of situation. Why would I change my investing principles when it comes to crypto when it works so well with stocks? I just DCA in and buy the same positions consistently through time. I should have done that with crypto, but I didn't. However, why I say if I could time travel back and do it over, why I wouldn't is because we had another crypto freeze in 2022 or 2021 where all the platforms where I would have stored that wealth went under and I would have lost it all or most of it, and it would have taken me 2 years to get like 30% of it back, which is what happened with platforms like Celsius and Voyager. And during that 2022 kind of Great Depression of crypto, I realized, well, this is the Great Depression of crypto. What happened during the real Great Depression? Well, banks shut down. That's happening now. And that created a vacuum where price no longer correlated with value. And so I went in harder into crypto, and I'm like, hey, if I was willing to buy Ethereum when it was 2K, 3K, 4K, I'm definitely going to be buying it when it's $900 again. So that's exactly what I did. I went full force and recovered what I lost because of the magnificent gains that came after that. So that's one lesson I learned in the crypto space is stick to the same principles. Right now, I'm still dollar cost averaging a very small amount, relatively speaking, into Bitcoin and Avalanche. I have enough Ethereum, and I'm even gambling. If you guys are listening right now, don't unsubscribe. I'm even gambling a little bit on that Trump coin because you never know what can happen, and it's very asymmetrical. It's like $10 a week. If it burns, it burns. So that's where I'm at.
That's interesting stuff, man. And it's also kind of related to the previous podcast we had with Fernando, where and the reason why I want to circle back to this is because it's not like you're putting 100% of your wealth in crypto or more of the aggressive slash speculative or more of the asymmetric potential investment returns. Like you're being smart about it, right? Like you have a core foundation, you have your emergency fund, you're putting a bulk of your investments in long-term businesses, like long-term reliable businesses, but you're also not afraid to take, a sliver of your portfolio and try it out in more of the riskier side of things because it fits your risk tolerance and you're ultimately very aware of what your risk tolerance is. And I would say even more, most importantly, you're able to withstand the volatility in those asset classes because what many people run into, especially as new investors, when they see these crazy exponential returns, is like, unfortunately, a lot of people get sucked into the asset classes, like the high risk asset classes near the top. And what they don't understand is the volatility nature with the different asset classes. And most people, like I'd say 80, 90% of people cannot hold those 90% downturns. It's emotionally difficult. It's not only is it emotionally difficult, but like when the majority of people on social media and just the world in general are hating on an asset, it's very difficult to keep the noise out of your head and stay true to what you're doing from an investment strategy. So like I can only imagine the volatility part and just dealing with all of the external noise from the crowd is also very difficult to deal with, as you've experienced that over the last couple of years. So very interesting to kind of point out. But thank you for sharing that, Georgie. Ultimately, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent talking about crypto because we could have a whole episode on crypto alone. But let's go ahead and pivot more towards the relationship side of things. So I want to make sure we cover that in some detail. So maybe if you want to just give us a little bit of context about kind of what happened over these 6 years, maybe
Yeah.
some of the tension that kind of unfolded with some of the differences, the value differences, especially when it comes to money. And I think what would also be helpful is some of the key lessons you learned around how to
Right.
deal with these situations or these tense money conversations, and maybe some of the plans you have to navigate future relationships, especially when it comes to money. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the points really correlates with what you just said about like being able to withstand 90% downturns, because any long-term relationship is going to be tested. You are going to have 90% downturns. You are going to want to leave, and you have to make that judgment call of like, hold on, is this, part of that natural cycle? Because love is not the opposite of hate. They are kind of a spectrum. What's the opposite of love is apathy, where you no longer care about the person, you no longer think about the person. I would argue you cannot love someone unless you, at least in moments, have hated on them in some way, shape, or form. That's just what I learned in that relationship, because there were definitely moments of like, how could this be? Like, this is the antithesis of what I believe to be the right thing to do. And I'm sure the other person felt the same way. And I definitely saw the flare in the eyes. And I think that's still a part of a healthy relationship, to have those moments of like, whoa, we are clashing with our values. Where it doesn't work is where you can't no longer discuss those values peacefully. It's okay to be passionate. It's okay to maybe even be loud, but you can't use it with anger. And that's where like some values might no longer correlate, where that might be okay if you're giving a speech to like you're running for office. A lot of people got into power by yelling and shouting, but that's one of my core values, is like, hey, you could be angry, but don't speak from anger. Find a way, or this is not the time and place for it. So that was something hard for me as a long-term investor, because I'm used to riding out those I guess bear markets. So yeah, that was definitely really, really tough to know, like, hey, is this it? Is this that winter where like we're not gonna go on? And I've had other relationships where we broke up, and 10 years later we are the best of friends, and we hang out almost every single week or every other week, and we share everything with each other, but it just wasn't that type of relationship. So that can also happen, and I'm really, really happy with that specific relationship that I have with an ex, who I can't even imagine calling her my ex. I just call her my best now. But it just wasn't a romantic match, and that's okay too.
That's really interesting, man. I think that's a very mature perspective, and I don't expect anything less from somebody like George, man, because he's somebody who's self-aware, very emotionally intelligent, try to assess things, and hands down, there's a reason why he's in the profession that he's in. He's not just helping others, but he's encouraging and teaching others on all various levels and spectrums, which, like, whatever you can imagine, this guy is already doing that type of work. And I'm glad that you've been able to kind of look back, reflect on the relationship there a bit, seeing where there was some mismatch or some things not being aligned, and sharing some of the challenges that you experienced. And because first and foremost, it's hard for men and guys to actually talk about these things. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost like there's no safe space for anyone to actually really talk, right? Like, you go online and you say something vulnerable, oh, hell break loose. You are now in the doghouse. You're getting it from everybody. So it's nice and refreshing to kind of hear you share a little bit more there. How has your professional background and your experience working with kids influenced your own behavior when it came to this relationship specifically?
So we actually met in the same job. And so that showed we already had so much in common. And that was something that we could build around. So, right, that core value. I find that when you are meeting a new person, you should have at least two passions that overlap, whether it be, your profession or maybe money and investing, or maybe it's child development or boogie boarding or surfing or ping pong. To me, see, most people would put boogie boarding and surfing in one category, but they are so different as a Californian. Like, I love boogie boarding. I'm the only boogie boarder out there. And it's like, are you going to have someone who kind of sits on the sand and watches you, or are they going to be in the water with you? What do you need, right? What's your emotional need there? I even found like even things like roller coasters. Can you do things you love with this person, or are they just going to kind of watch and support? There's definitely fields where maybe like doing this podcast, hey, you don't need to be on the podcast, but I do expect you to like watch and support and like give me notes. How could I speak better? How could I prepare better? Where do you think I messed up? That's cool, but I would rather have someone in the water with me than watching me from the sand. And that doesn't mean that that person's doing something that's wrong, right? It's just we have different values, we have different joys, and I just expect a person to try. And same with me, right? Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but with that Beyond Meat joke I made a little bit earlier, I'm very highly selective when it comes to my food. Like ketchup, I'm not gonna eat it. And if I'm with someone who's a foodie, who that's gonna be tough, right? I'm already frugal by nature. This isn't like a choice. I was born this way, so it was a lot easier for me to get into this whole like budgeting, saving. I don't spend money on stupid things. I think ketchup's stupid. I'm never gonna buy a bottle of ketchup. So going on dates and things like that, I'm like, should I bring my buckwheat, my glass of buckwheat from home? Uh, and it's not to save money. I just don't like the food. I don't want to take the risk on like extra saucy pizza. That's not something I do. And for someone, that's a hard no. For someone else, that's silly. And for another person, it's like, wow, this person hates this, but he's finding like it's not just about like the food. They're gonna bring their own food and they're gonna have a nice place, eating out with me, enjoying the atmosphere and things like that. I've done that with my coworkers. I've done that with my ex as well. But she was really good at like meeting me halfway and being like, hey, I know you don't like or you think you don't like this, but just try it out. And I've been introduced to so many new foods by taking that risk. Unfortunately, she was not into boogie boarding as much as I was into some of that new foods that I was introduced to.
I got a question for you. For being in the behavior and being in that line of work, and your ex being in that line of work, do you bring that home with you? Do you guys have conflicting arguments? And because you guys are both intellectuals, does it ever affect anything at home?
Yeah, that's a great one. So, um, my field really, really focused on the behavioral aspects of it, while her field focused more on the educational aspects of it. So it was the best of both worlds where she could tell me all of these awesome things about like how to teach a person like, English and like shortcuts to that because we work with a lot of kids who don't they might have like speech apraxia where they don't have full control over maybe like their tongue brain connection and they're trying to communicate with words but they're not able to get it out. So she was showing like cool ways to do it quicker while I focus on the behavioral, like, are you cooperating? How can I help motivate you to want to cooperate? So it was a really, really cool fusion. We had a lot of talks, but at the same time, right, I would get really nerdy with one thing, and I made sure to never like go into pure teacher mode where like I know so much about this. Let me just information dump on you. So I would always wait for those opportunities. And obviously, when it comes to money, I'm obsessed with the concept of money. It's spiritual to me. So that's where I was really, really, really careful about introducing like money conversations and money topics. When was it the appropriate time to? When was the person ready to do that? So that was definitely very tricky to navigate.
Well said. And I think speaking of your obsession and like interest with money and just the nature of it and the entire journey there, as you reflect on your own behavior during the relationship, what impact did your upbringing and family dynamics kind of had on the relationship, and how did that shape you as an adult when it comes to your financial behavior?
So my mom gave me the really traditional advice, and she said, "Hey, remember, You don't just marry the girl, you marry the family, right? And for anyone listening to, if you're like LGBT, you don't marry the person, you marry the family, you marry the community, you marry their friends become your friends, and you have to take that into account. And when you're in love, you're like, fudge the rest of the world, we're gonna figure it out, it's just us against everyone. But it's not. You need the community. Without the community, who's going to watch your kids? It's going to fall apart unless you have other people outside who you could rely on. In our kind of capitalistic, monogamous world, and this kind of like obsession with the nuclear family, which has a lot of pros, but it also has a lot of cons, where it's just two people and three kids. How are you going to bond together as partners? Unless you have the community watching the kids or raising them as well with you. For me, I come from a household where my grandparents and my mom raised me. My dad left real early, and a lot of those financial values, my mom was not prepared. He forged her signature and for the divorce papers, put $0 child support, stayed in another country. So my mom came in with the scarcity mindset, and I had to kind of guide her to overcome that and start investing, going not just 401k target date funds, but let's roll it over into a rollover IRA and really take control of this money here. So that definitely impacted me, where I'm like, I can't have the scarcity mindset. I calculated the opportunity cost of my mom's scarcity mindset and her being like really reserved when it comes to investing. So I went full force, right? And for my ex-partner, they come from a completely different world. Now, we both come from poverty, but her poverty is different than my poverty was. We were on welfare and food stamps, but my mom came from the Soviet Union, where you get a master's level education for free. There's different expectations for what it means to be poor. Everybody's poor in the Soviet Union, right? So there's an equality with that. Over here in the United States, there's a lot more classism and different, like completely different levels of wealth. So she came from that kind of background. She was more of a caretaker of other people in her family. And that's where we were like, hey, we had value clashes with that. Like, for example, what is helping and what is enabling? And obviously, we disagreed on that. So I came up with like a rule after the relationship, started thinking about it, like what really went wrong? What did I disagree with at my core? Because I think she's a great person. And I know Rick and Morty are attending our wedding in an alternate dimension right now and having a great time, and it all works out. But in this dimension, what didn't work out? And I figured out she was really helping a person in need in her family. And that was the most noblest thing you can do. But for me, right, there's limits to how much you can give another person, right? There's a fine line between help and enabling. And I kind of broke it down into three categories, where there's 100% of you and you can give. That's the most you can give, is 100% of you to another person. That's the limit. If you give 100% of you to another person, there's nothing left for your life. So definitely giving 100% to someone else is not the answer. But there's different categories, right? If it's a parent, for example, you're taking care of, or a grandparent, there's money you can help them with. You could do favors with them, and you can emotionally help them, have deep conversations with them, help them figure it out. And you have to break down that percentage of yourself that you're willing to give that person into those three categories. And a lot of times, people really try to give everything they have left to all three categories at the same time. And that means you end up living for another person. Now, you make sure that person doesn't drown, and that's noble. That's amazing. That's honest. But what's left of you after that? And that's something where we had a huge disagreement with. And I don't think I was right. I don't think she was wrong. I just think we had different values of what is important and what is the right thing to do.
Wow, very interesting. I think is really, I think it's like towards the end right there, you touched on something that is very difficult. I mean, is damn near impossible to execute, right? Because like you said, you married a family, you know, it's like their friends is your friends. And not only that, you also have your quote unquote immediate bloodline family that you came from, right? And so you might have nieces, uncles, aunts, parents, grandparents, and then you know you have to maintain those relationships as well, along with your romantic partner and that relationship, and your other maybe your colleagues and a bunch of other activities, the friends you might play Pokemon Go with, or people you might trade your Pokemon cards with or whatnot, right? So it's very difficult for everyone to manage to split themselves and multiply themselves in so many forms and show up for themselves and for the people that they care about, right? It is really, really difficult to decipher. And I think I want to highlight that area a little bit because that's something that we all deal with. Every single one of us deal with that, right? Because people have different needs, different wants. So you're trying to be the best friend or the best partner, the best kid, right? The best uncle, whatever it is possible. But you do have limitations. You are one person, and so the challenge in trying to decipher how to split yourself appropriately in those three different ranges is damn near impossible because some people might need more than what you think you can give, or sometimes you might not know how much they actually need you to give more, right? Like even if you're like, okay, well, I only got 10% left, they might need you to give 30%, and they could be in a very difficult space mentally as well, right? And so there's a whole bunch of things and nuances there. And I think one of the biggest takeaway there is to always understand that one, there are limitations, and two, there are blind spots, right? Like we can't know everything in someone's head, and someone also can't know everything inside of our head. You know what I mean? So I think knowing that it's okay to not be perfect for everyone, is okay to not always have it together, is okay for things to be a little bit chaotic and confusing, and understand that is a natural course of life. It's a natural part of the process. And I like the fact that you talked about your upbringing a little bit in terms of like the type of family dynamics you had and all of that. I grew up in a family compound back home in Ghana, and it's like the whole family literally lived together, right? Like so your uncles, your aunts, cousins, grandparents, all in the same space. So I think that afforded me a really interesting experience or start to life in a way that in our modern society in the US, right? Like you said, it's more like, hey, just the immediate family kind of is knit separately from everything else and everyone else. And that can create a lot of financial difficulties and strain on the relationship, right? It's a lot of pain points. You spoke about babysitting. If grandparents and everybody else is in a different state, you're going to have to pay that $1,000, maybe $2,000 just for somebody to babysit your kid, right? And not just babysitting, just raising the child together in general, and being far from family and events and holidays, milestones, like all of these things can be very, very difficult. And so I think a lot of times we're so focused on, hey, we're grinding, I'm getting to the bag, the portfolios are doing great, but it's so easy to let the relationships that we have, whether it be romantic relationships or other forms of relationships that we have, it's so easy for that to be on the back burner, right? And I hope that everybody out there that's listening to this episode has somebody, whether it's your best friend or a group of friends or a community that you're part of, that reminds you that it's okay to be human, number one, and then secondly, whenever you are quote unquote drifting too far away from some of the most important relationships that we have, I hope somebody's there to kind of help remind you, like, hey, don't forget to check in on your parents. Maybe you haven't called them in a little bit, right? You haven't spoken to your best friend in a while. You guys haven't had dinner in a minute with your partner. You've been busy working because bills got to get paid, but don't forget, you can't ignore your partner, the person that's going through everything with you, the person that's there trying to support, going through the thick and thin. We all have dreams, individually and cohesively, right? And so sometimes you might put your dreams on the back burner, to kind of facilitate and help her execute some of her dreams or things that make her feel fulfilled, and vice versa, right? And I think relationships is interesting because it literally exposes everything. I know on this podcast, our main focus tends to be on the money piece and how to build wealth, but you have to understand it's the same strategy and approach when it comes to relationships, right? You want a dollar cost average, meaning take it one day at a time, right? Do your homework and do your research, especially if you're going to buy individual stocks, right? And so whoever your partner is, take time to get to know people, and I'll share a little bit here as well, because when I first met my fiance, it took a long time, and it wasn't until I actually spoke to her father about, I was like, hey, look, tell me what her upbringing was. What was her energy like, right? Like what was like the person? Who was that person growing up? Like what was those experiences like? And that gave me a ton of insight to how she operate as an adult, right? And I think a lot of times we meet people as adults and we're like, well, the baseline is here, my baseline is here. You're supposed to already come with certain attributes, certain characteristics, X, Y, and Z, and we're supposed to just build up. No, sometimes you do have to peel back the layers and go back, because that's going to give you more understanding and it's going to help you become more patient and graceful in who you're dealing with. So I know I just went on a crazy tangent on a highway 100 miles an hour, but I just think it's really important that we realize how critical and important relationships are, and you can't put a price, especially on good ones and healthy ones. And I'm glad that you guys were able to get to a point where you knew it wasn't going to work for the both of you, right? Because sometimes people force it or stay stuck in it, and then it festers. It can get very dangerous for the both parties. And to be able to separate and understand that, hey, not everybody's for you at certain points in life and timeline, I think that's a really mature way to look at it, because these days is really tough. It's really tough to kind of. Before it was a lot easier. If you paid the bills, man, everything was fine. Right? But we've evolved. We've gotten wiser. We've gotten smarter. Society has gotten better, and most of us are looking for partners that we can really be compatible with and build together. And of course, it's gonna go through up and downs, just like the stock market. But you have to stick it out, especially if it's a good one and it's the right one.
Well said, Bafi. And something that I kind of dealt with recently, about a couple months ago, is I had a coaching client who came on and he was all financially savvy. Like he's been following the market hustle for like over a year. And when I got on the call, it was a Zoom call. He pulled up his his budget planner that he filled out. We kind of went over it all, and he was all aligned. Like he had everything down to a T. Like he had all his money organized. He had everything planned out. But what I found out, halfway through the call was he's like, "Hey, my wife's going to come in and join in. Can you help her get on the same page as me?" And I was like, this is going to require more than an hour of time because, like, for one, uh, I can understand how when somebody takes, like, he's been investing over a year of trying to learn money management skills and investing skills, but obviously, managing the relationship side of things and trying to get everybody on the same page, like that's a whole nother domain. And it's also not as easy as, a quick call to get everybody linked up, especially when, they both came from completely different family backgrounds. Her family, money was a lot more abundant. So like she came from a family where money wasn't really an issue in the family side of things. So when they were both building out their family, she just assumed like he would cover all the financial side of things and that would kind of be taken care of. But they were kind of running into like an overspending problem, and he was just having trouble trying to get them both on the same page. And really, what it highlighted to me was just it's difficult to learn how to change your own financial skills and manage your own money, but it's equally difficult trying to help maybe a partner or somebody else when you see maybe the mistakes they're making or the the lack of perspective when it comes to certain spending habits that they might be falling into. But what I've kind of noticed, like my experience as, helping people build better money habits is you can't teach somebody or force somebody to learn what they don't want to learn. And it's very difficult to change certain habits or views or perspectives around money when somebody comes from a background and that background has kind of solidified a certain belief around how they perceive money, or it could even be negative. Like maybe they had bad experiences with money. Their family, always saw it as a scarce resource, and that kind of trickled down into their own beliefs. Especially like as you grow older, the beliefs you hold on to become a lot more ingrained in your life, and it becomes more difficult to break out of maybe those limiting beliefs when it comes to money. Georgie, me, Bafi, Pierce, we all talk about great financial habits, and we leave practical tips all the time. Like we could sit here and talk hours about stock market investing and budgeting because we have deep experience in this field because we've done so much research. We've spent years investing and tweaking our own strategies. But just because we are deeply ingrained in this space and we understand it, we have a pretty deep understanding of how these habits correlates to relationships, how they correlate to the quality of our lives. That doesn't mean everybody else is going to have that same perspective as you. If you sit here and try to tell people how to budget or how to invest, if they're not ready for that, if they're not ready to receive that information, it's going to go in one ear and right out the other. So it's a very difficult and kind of nuanced subject to kind of tackle, especially when it comes to managing the intimate relationship side of things, because as Georgie highlighted and Bafi as well, is like when love's involved, a lot of the logic just goes right out the window. So
Stakes are
we can sit
higher,
here and
man.
say, yeah, exactly. Exactly. We can sit here and say like spend less than you're making. Like logically, everybody understands that. But anytime there's human emotions, that's when things get pretty tricky.
Yeah. I
Man.
actually have a tip on that topic where like some things are really, really hard to just like, hey, you don't know this, here's the knowledge, now go do it, right? Because I'm a behavior analyst and I focus a lot on human motivation. And so what I find that really, really helps is even if you know more about the topic, which is usually the person who ends up taking over that field, right? Typically in our culture, right, a woman might know more about children, which it doesn't have to be. We have the same access to the internet. We can learn all the same things and take equal responsibility or a different type of responsibility. Same thing with money. If a person has like uh, a higher education in finances, all of a sudden they're in charge of the household finances. It does not have to be that way. And usually, what we find is when there's only one person completely taking control of a category, right? It doesn't mean you can't be a leader, but it means if your partner has no say and they just trust you 100%, you're going to be in situations like my mom was, where she just put absolute trust in her partner and she got fudged. It ended up working out because destiny was on her side and she made some great choices with the limited choices that she did have, but it was much harder than it needed to be. So, what I find is really useful is just instead of having a debate or a lecture, have a discussion, right? Hey, we have this. And this was actually where I realized that our relationship was going to have a downfall and we weren't going to make it through. And it's not just a 90% swing. We set up mutual money goals, right, for different aspects of life. And I asked this question of what percentage of your income went towards our mutual goals? So it's so hard, like Bafi said, to measure a relationship. There's infinite like avenues to go into. But when you just measure the finances of the relationship, it makes it possible to kind of analyze it. Like I said at the beginning of this, it is a rough kind of mirror, right? It's always moving around, so it's not a perfect like representation of your behaviors, but the answer that I heard did not correlate with my game plan at all, and I projected out that percentage 10 years into the future, 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future. And no matter how much time passed, it was never going to be enough to what I considered we would hit our mutual goals. So that's one way that we can measure. But if, at another stage of the relationship, it could be like, hey, we're not hitting our mutual goal because it's a mutual goal, right? It's not I'm doing my part and you're not doing your part. It's, hey, we're not talking about this in a way where we're both motivated to do what we have to do. So, what can I do to help you, right? What's missing? It's okay to like open it up and talk about it that way too. And I find that like the sooner you do it, the better. Just don't do it on the first date because you don't have a relationship yet. Don't pull out your Roth IRA, your 401k, and be like, hey, do you know what this is? Don't do little tests either. Don't be like, oh, so one of my heroes is Warren Buffett, and like scan them for like, did their eyes dilate? Do they know who that is? Don't be doing that. Like, have fun, have a good time, search for values later. If you can't have a good time together, then there's no point in even like aligning your values or seeing what matches. So slow down a little bit, relax a lot, and have fun. And by the third date, definitely ask about Warren Buffett.
Nice, nice, nice. I love that, man. So it sounds like it comes down to communication and collaboration, right? I mean, and it's important to have those difficult conversations. Obviously, not on the first date because, hello, you're just a stranger, you know. But and I know I'm guilty of this as well. Is at times it's very difficult to have the difficult conversations, even if you've been in a relationship for 6 years, 10 years, or married for 20. I mean, some conversations is like you have to kind of brace yourself a little bit, or like you're sitting there running through certain scenarios in your head before you kind of, all right, what should be my delivery style, right? Like, how can it be best received, or how can we get the message across without other things kind of, making it convoluted? So, and it's difficult. You don't want to kill the vibe. You don't want to be the bad guy. But it's important because it's teamwork, right? And of course, you're gonna make a ton of mistakes. It's trial and error. It can take some time to figure it out. And on one hand, it's healthy too because you get to see each other and see how each other handles these adversities and disagreements, and you have dialogues and go over it over time. But it's all part of it. I think people have been assuming that relationships are supposed to be this simple, easy thing that shouldn't be complex or as difficult as it is. But that's not the case. It's been relationships have been the same for thousands of years, and it's not going to change. Right? It's two different people. Two first of all, two different humans. I mean, even if you have your own twin, you're gonna have disagreements, and you guys are literally identical. You know what I mean? It's like you're still gonna have challenges. So, I mean, I think Georgia, I want to ask you this question though, because you started touching a few things here, but I think there's a question that we all tend to see on social media just about all the time, right? What is your take on 50-50?
So I believe that, there's different values here, and that's an important like first test. For me, I go 100-0 in the beginning, right? Like I'm here to give you 100%, but that doesn't mean we're gonna go out to eat lobster because first of all, I don't even eat lobster. Um so I think I really like I don't know where I heard it, but I really like 100-100. Just give your best, right? But at the same time, there's a time to give 100, right? Earlier we talked about sometimes 100 is just you can't give 100%, right? Maybe as long as you're giving the same amount or roughly the same amount or it balances out, that's what's important. When it comes to paying for things, I find it really, really refreshing when your partner, regardless of their sex or gender, they can bring in and kind of carry their own. It doesn't mean they're gonna like pay all the time for their portion, right? You can think of it as a joint thing too. Like this is our money if you're deeper in the relationship. So there is no more 50-50 or whatever, whatever. It's just 100, 100, 100 every single time. When it comes to dating though, my mom's like, I will slap you if you ever make a lady pay. So I'm like, I don't want to get slapped by my mom. But also I do find that it's empowering for people to be able to gift gifts to one another. In my last relationship, like there were many, many times where she would pay for things and it felt really nice. Now at the same time I was like, oh, did you budget for this? And that's on me, right? So where I'd be like, oh, I can't have you pay for this because I don't think you budgeted for this, and if you didn't budget for this, then it's going to cause trauma later on, and now it's a cycle, right? So those are some things that I had to really negotiate. But at the end of the day, do what you think is right. 50-50 could be the best thing. It could be 0-0, right? You both don't pay for anything and you steal from the store and bond over that.
Good point. I think being real and honest is definitely important, right? Because if the objective is forever, um, it's important to be real and honest. I mean, because otherwise, what you're building it on what a facade? You put a makeup on it, like you just right. There are a lot of people that, especially in the dating scene, instead of actually being honest and real about what they are comfortable with or what they can work with versus what they can't, they will just kind of let things flow as if they're comfortable with it until it boils up and then becomes a problem, right? So, um, when I first met my lady, I didn't even want to go on dates because I didn't have the money to go out, to be honest, man. I know it's crazy. I literally had no, I was broke college student. I'm working at McDonald's, man, like fries every day just to have some piece of change so I can buy my damn books. I didn't have money to go out. So, and I was very fortunate. I was with somebody who understood that if I could, I would. Right. Like, and that's one thing I've always been transparent about when it came to like my dating life, or in this case with my partner, is like, she knew my finances from the start. I'm not somebody who's gonna, because otherwise it's like, okay, I'm, I don't want there to be assumptions, right? Okay, in terms of, oh, he's being frugal, or he just don't care about me, or he doesn't want to spend time with me or have experiences with me. That's not the case. When you see my bank account and I only got $20 in that thing, it speaks for itself, right? So, but I was very fortunate because she also didn't want to miss out on certain life experiences, right? Because we're young, and we will get old eventually. And so she didn't want to miss out on life experiences. So she was willing to pay for things many times, similar to what you shared as well. And because she was actually making more money than I was for a very long time. It's only very recently that I would say like the tables has flipped. And one thing I made sure to do is that is reciprocated. She's kept, we're able to have a lot of fun and enjoy our company and make sure that there's less stress. And if I remember there was one time she was working at a place and it was really bad. It got really bad. She was losing a ton of weight. I told her to just stop working. Because what's the point? Like if you get sick or something worse happens, then what? So I told her to stop working. We'll figure it out. She could just relax, nurse herself back to good health, and we'll sort it out that way. So I think learning to appreciate each other in all phases of the relationship and in all phases of life's trial and tribulation is so important because without that, I mean, there's an important string in making sure that the relationship does go the direction you want it to go in because you're gonna remember those moments. Understand that you're dealing with somebody else and everybody's going through stuff and everybody's at a different stage. So just be kind and try your best to put your best foot forward because if there's somebody you want to try and spend the rest of your life with, you build something special with, you want to really give it a good go. And even if it doesn't work out, you can both still appreciate the effort that you both put in together.
Well said, Bafi. Well said. It's especially true when it comes to the money dynamics as well, because we can sit here and say what you should or shouldn't do when it comes to approaching a certain relationship, or whether it's your partner or whether it's even a family member like your parents, whether it's a brother or sister, like how to deal with certain financial dynamics. Like we can sit here and tell you what to do or what not to do, but really it comes down to that, everybody's situation is going to be different. That some people have healthier relationships with their family than others, while others might have toxic relationships or toxic family members that they want to stay the hell away from. It's like it's going to be different for everybody, and especially when it comes to money, because money itself, like money by itself, is already a pretty complex subject, and it can be difficult for just you yourself to deal with building better money habits, let alone a completely another person. So it's kind of like playing, the game gets a little bit more complicated when you bring on, another person. Once you get married, you're literally building that partnership, and navigating money with two people is much more difficult than navigating with it through one person. So keep that in mind. And I really like the perspective you shared, Bafi. I think that's super important to consider. Georgie, we're approaching the hour. This has been a great podcast. We've gone through a lot of information. And again, I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on here and be vulnerable, talking about this specific subject. I would love to hear maybe if you have some tips or some potential advice when it comes to maybe some of our listeners who are dealing with some tense financial situations with their significant other. Is there anything that you found, or maybe moving out of this relationship, that you've learned of like a good way to deal with the tense financial situation or conversations? Like, is there tactics or some practical perspective you could give somebody to deal with navigating those tense financial disagreements or misalignments before completely giving up on it?
I think one thing to consider is that is the worst thing that will happen, right? Might be the best thing that will happen for both of you. And if you do split your separate ways, it doesn't have to be forever. You might come back together in the same form or a different form. But what I kind of realized, even talking with all of you guys here, is when that relationship is over in its current form, you are not starting over with a new person. You are taking that with you the same way that when we entered that relationship, we took everything our moms taught us about money. We are never a blank slate. So I don't see it as wasting 6 years of time. So if anyone's like breaking up with someone or going through it after 10 years, 5 years, even 3 months, it's not a waste of time. That is the price for the school of life, right? Sometimes we pay with money, sometimes we pay with time, sometimes we pay with our life. But this is one of those cases where I realized that I think both of us walked away learning just so much about not each other, but ourselves, and what we're willing to tolerate or accept when we pick or find new partners. When it comes to current partners and it's shaky. I think he's not my favorite president, but I really love this quote. Ronald Reagan said that peace is not the absence of conflict, but it's the ability to resolve conflict by peaceful means. I couldn't remember the Rick and Morty is called Rick and Morty, but I remember that quote. That's so weird. But I really love that because conflict is not a negative thing. It is where we get to battle it out, and battling is fun. Humans love wrestling. We have like they're even in our stories, right? Like they're all battles, and that's where the person comes out. If Goku never battled Vegeta, they wouldn't be BFFs, right? Even in the Bible and other stories, there's like Abraham wrestled with God, right? They battled, and then Abraham came out knowing a lot more about himself and having a better relationship with God. So it is okay to have conflict. Don't fear it. Don't avoid it. If you do, you will suffer because every relationship has a dragon in it, and it's a little dragon. The more you avoid it, the bigger that dragon gets, and then both of you are not going to be able to beat that dragon. So I think there's definitely mistakes made in every relationship. In mine is I didn't look at the dragon early enough. I didn't face it early enough. I avoided without even recognizing I was avoiding. You have to know yourself so much, and that's the reason people get into these holes financially is they're on autopilot and they don't even recognize they're on autopilot and they're spending and making all of these bad habits, and 10 years later they realize, "Oh shoot, these are habits. They're not I created this." But if you do create something, you have the power to uncreate it. If you're deep in that relationship, right, it's never too late to do the right thing and start having those money conversations. It doesn't have to be like, so what do we invest in? It could be just like, hey, what is money? Let's just learn about the history of money, right? There's no pressure in learning where does money come from, right? And you might learn that like, hey, learning together is fun. Let's pause the money thing and learn about, I don't know, like Iraq. Now let's learn about platypi or platypus. I don't know what the how we can use that. So I think that's what you can do to alleviate some of the pressure when it comes to money is like pick something both of you don't care about when it comes to money and learn everything you can about it. Who is Warren Buffett and what job did he have when he was 10 years old? And which one of his friends worked at that same place just at a different time that ended up being his business partner for the next, I think like 8 decades or something.
Well said, Georgie. Great stuff right there. And really, what I found is I feel like the most important thing is building the building or both understanding the why behind what the hell you're doing. It's like, why are we taking the time to learn about money? Why are we taking the time to budget? Why are we taking the time to learn about investing? Because if you're clear on the why you're doing it to begin with, it's a lot easier to go through the hours of educating yourself, sharpening your investing skills, sharpening your budgeting skills, taking a look at your spending habits, which isn't always easy to do, pulling up that statement. There can be a lot of resistance there alone from what I've found working with people. So like taking the time to understand why you're doing it to begin with is very helpful at kind of getting over that hurdle and just tackling that sleeping giants that you're kind of ignoring. Because the one thing, with conflict in general, like whether it's relationship conflict or whether it's conflict with people at work or whether it's conflict with if you have business partners, like whatever it is, the longer you delay or ignore that conflict, the bigger that problem's going to get, right? Because conflict, what I found, in my own life is usually rooted in just two different people having different viewpoints or perspectives on a certain thing. And a lot of that conflict feeling comes from not wanting to poke the hole in your perspective or maybe their perspective out of fear of the emotional backlash from that, right? So the problem with it is it gets bigger the more you kind of ignore it and the more you just kind of sweep it under the rug. So the sooner you can just kind of, jump out and get ahead of it, it's only going to benefit you. And really what I found is it also grows you. Like you become more aligned with maybe the other person or with your own worldview. Like when you break your own limiting beliefs, you build a deeper perspective with whatever the hell it is. And this is especially true in the stock market, where like you can have a certain belief with how the stock market works or with a certain asset that you like, whether it's crypto or the S&P 500 or some random stock. But if you close off every other potential perspective and you say that you're the ones yours is right, everybody else is wrong, Well, really what you do is you limit yourself out of potential opportunities to benefit from. And that's something you don't want to fall into, because you just limit the opportunities of potentially growing richer, growing wealthier, and potentially being able to retire a lot sooner. And really, that's what we strive to build the Market Hustle, this whole community with, is we want to build, a community where we have different perspectives on here. So not only do me, Boffy, and Pierce learn, but everybody listening, like you all can benefit from hearing these different perspectives, hearing how people view money, hearing how people view the stock markets, to hopefully challenge your own limiting beliefs that might be holding you back, so you can grow and grow financially and eventually grow richer with that as well. So like that's really the main objective here. So Georgiy, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, being willing to share your experience, share your story, and of course share your lovely tips. I'm sure many people listening to this are going to learn a lot from that. So thank you again. And before we officially wrap this up, I want to check in with our co-host to see if they have any closing remarks. We'll check with Pierce. Pierce, do you have any closing remarks to finalize episode 37?
No, I just want to thank you for your honesty and just being open and being vulnerable. I mean, like you said, I think Boffy said, like, you can't really do this now. People are just going to clown you and make fun of you and call you names and stuff. But it's a very honorable thing to be able to do. So I respect that.
100%, man. How about you, Boffy? Any closing remarks to wrap up episode 37?
No, nothing major, man. I think we've said a lot that needed to be said, and my only thing is hope to see you again soon, Georgie.
Yeah, Georgia, we'll have to bring you back. And I think it'd be fun to tackle more of the crypto side of things, because we haven't really dived into that too deeply. So maybe you can share some perspectives of how you view that in the future. We'll have to line up another episode. But Georgie, any closing remarks to the lovely listeners here at the Market Hustle community before we officially wrap up?
Yeah, just remember it's not the end of the world when it feels like it's the end of the world. It's okay to suffer. It probably means you're learning something. Just don't suffer for no reason. And yeah, know when it is time to leave. And it's okay sometimes to make a mistake with that. There's 8 billion people in the world. We might not have access to all of them, but we have access to a whole lot of them, especially if you're listening to this. If you could build a deep relationship with one person, you will be able to build it with someone else eventually, just when you're ready. And don't forget to build it with yourselves. And that's all I got.
Great stuff, man. Well, thanks again, Georgie, for coming on. Episode 37 is officially in the books. Pierce and Boffy, thank you again for coming on as our lovely co-host. And Market Hustle community, we will see you back next week. We actually have one of our listeners coming on as a special guest. So it's going to be a lot of fun to bring on somebody who has been listening to every single episode to share the experience with everything they've learned and how they've applied it to their own life. So I'm really excited for that one. That being said, if you have a couple of minutes, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're currently listening on, and also leave a comment. Leave a great comment about what you're learning, what you're kind of soaking in, because it really helps us make sure we're on the right page with everything we're talking about, and it shows the lovely community that we have and that we're building here. And we can't wait to continue to bring many more of these episodes in 2025. So that's a wrap. I hope all of you have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you back next week. Bye-bye.
If you feel just like I do, link up, come and join this crew. Hey, I'ma go invest and I'ma watch my money double. Take it to another level with that market hustle. Hey, always play it smart, you ain't dealing with a sucker. Take it to another level with that market hustle. I'ma hustle, hustle 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 with that market hustle. Go.